Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining what is our second webinar here in San Francisco. Today, Ian and I will be running through strategic sourcing for high-tier tech talent, drawing on our experience from working across CJ startups to enterprise businesses. The webinar itself will be about 35 minutes, and we'll have time at the end to run through some questions that you guys have got. We'll run through the content shortly with you. But first, we'll do a couple of quick intros. I'm Damien. I'm a client lead here at Talentful. I have over 8 years experience in recruiting. I spent a lot of that time at agency recruiting tech candidates for a wide range of companies, from startups to global banks. I then moved to Talentful, where I've been working on in-house projects for the past 2 years. Those projects have ranged from startups, so building out recruitment functions from scratch, through to much larger organizations, for example, Beyond Trust, where I worked with an existing team to own tech recruiting in the UK. I've recently moved to San Francisco back in January, where I joined a Series A startup. So I do have a few months of San Francisco sourcing experience too.
Cool, thanks, Damien. So I'm Evie. I'm also a client lead at Talentful, based here in San Francisco. As you can hear from my accent, I also moved over from London. It was roughly about 5 weeks ago, so I have been in isolation since and haven't been able to explore. But I've been with Talentful for about 4 years, and in that time partnered with 8 of our clients. I'm currently with X, the Moonshot Factory, previously known as Google X. So these projects have ranged from early stage tech startups like Attest, where we were scaling really fast and building out a recruiting infrastructure, helping venture-backed games companies like Gram Games open up a new HQ in London and building out that studio from scratch, to larger tech enterprises like DeepMind, where I was building out a sourcing function and managing a team of sourcers. Historically, I've been a generalist, recruiting everything from commercial, marketing, design, engineering. But over the past few years, I've been more focused on tech, in particular high-tier deep tech. I've always had a keen interest in technical sourcing and exploring new methods for finding great talent. And now a brief introduction to Talentful. So we're a 140-strong team of talent experts, helping to build companies changing the world. We do that through end-to-end recruitment delivery, our culture matching platform Insightful, and our employer branding studio. Our consultants embed in high growth companies on a flexible basis and create outstanding recruitment processes and experiences for our clients. We're all over the place now. You can find Talentful in London, which is our HQ, Berlin, and San Francisco, where we've been since January. And we're working with seed-backed tech startups all the way through to household names like Google and King. Damien.
Great. So now you've got a good idea of who we are and Talentful. Let me run through what we'll be covering today. So firstly, we'll look at what strategic sourcing is and why it's important. We'll then move on and focus on the discovery phase of your sourcing strategy, which should give you some great guidance towards putting your market map together. We'll then walk through some of the sourcing tools that Evie and I particularly like, covering why it's important that you use a diverse range of tools when you are doing your sourcing. And finally, we'll take a look at talent pooling, why you should be doing that, before jumping in some of the questions that you have. So Evie, why don't you get us started?
Yeah. So let's start by thinking about what strategic sourcing is. We all know what sourcing is, but what makes it strategic? In my mind, strategic sourcing is a break from only sourcing active candidates for specific open roles to sourcing continuously for future needs and targeting both active and passive candidates. Strategic sourcing is targeted, finding and engaging high quality candidates instead of relying on a high quantity post and pray approach. I've previously heard things like it's a numbers game, and while volume of input directly correlates with output, in a competitive market like the one we're in, volume simply isn't enough. Modern recruiting is about establishing a presence in the mind of your target audience and nurturing relationships over time. It's insights and data driven and brings market knowledge to the wider talent acquisition organization that informs strategic decision making. It improves speed and efficiency of your team by acquiring specialized sourcing skills and diversifying your channels to hire, which is what we're going to be dwelling on in a bit. And it's predictive, enabling you to forecast better and hire quicker. And some data to back up why strategic sourcing is beneficial and why we should be doing it. 52% of people who apply for jobs are underqualified. 36% of the workforce is actively looking for a new opportunity at any given time, but 90% are willing to talk. Source candidates are hired at more than twice the rate of inbound applicants. Best-in-class companies are 55% more likely to proactively source than their peers. So I'll now hand over to Damien, who's going to go through the research and discovery phase of strategic sourcing.
Thanks, Evie. I really like that statistic. 90% of people are willing to talk. So that makes it really important to find exactly where those people are and ultimately reach them. So let's talk about the research and discovery phase of talent strategy. Ultimately, the aim here is to avoid jumping into a search with no real plan. As recruiters at the moment, we've got access to so much great information. We really want to make use of that and make sure our searches are strategic and as data driven as possible. Whether you are new to a company or you're hiring for a new team, you're working with a new hiring manager, or you're just working on a position that you haven't sourced for in a while, the research step is equally important across all of those. You really need to be investing time to understand your team's culture and those slight nuances your hiring managers are going to be picking up on. This will ultimately reduce time to hire because you'll be getting the right candidates in front of the team as soon as you can. We've broken this down into 3 sections, so the who, the where, and then the market map. I really like the expression finding your tribe. It's something I know a lot of you will have heard before, but ultimately that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to find the best talent who's really going to thrive in the companies that we are recruiting for. Once you've found the who, we can figure out the where and then put that market map together. So let's start with the who. So we all know as recruiters the importance of finding that right kick. The most efficient way of doing that is having a thorough kickoff for each position that you work on. You can gather as much detail about the entire process as you can and give yourself a really clear understanding on exactly what skills you're looking for. So both technical and soft skills. For example, you want to be figuring out the size of teams candidates have been working in, the makeups of those teams, the types of projects that they've been working on. This is all really helpful information in terms of creating that candidate persona, which you're going to target. For me, and a really lucky position that we are in at Talentful, is because we are embedded recruiters, we have that ability to really immerse ourselves in the teams that we're working with, which is a really powerful asset, really, in understanding that culture. For me, it holds equal weight in understanding those softer skills. It may take a little bit more time than having a kickoff, but it's definitely worth investing your time with new companies and new teams and really becoming a part of that team so you can understand the type of person who's really going to thrive in that company. So once you've figured out the who and who it is you're looking to target, you can then move on to where that talent is going to be. We use the information that we've gathered from those kickoffs to figure out the most likely place to find this. So technical skills really useful in market mapping other companies that we can headhunt from. There's tons of data out there on companies' tech stacks, so that's really useful. And then we can use the softer skills to identify companies with similar values or similar to work ethics to what we're trying to create ourselves. For example, if you're looking for people who have a fail fast mentality of a startup, or being used to kind of working on continuous iterations, a bit of market research will uncover which companies most likely are going to be working in that fashion. So you can then put together your market map using things like LinkedIn Insights, Y Combinator, and Crunchbase. These are really great tools to put your market map together. And we'll go into these in a little bit more detail later on. But having that total addressable market, knowing exactly where the candidates are, will allow you to strategically start reaching out to the talent that you want and really maximize the likelihood that these people are going to be a good fit for your business, but also that you're going to be a really good fit for them. So you can make sure your response rates are going to be high as well. For example, if you're looking for strong ICs, the likes of big companies, Facebook and Google might have great candidates for you. But if you are looking for those engineers who are going to thrive in really instruction environments, they're probably not the best places to start. And also having that strong market map, it'll help you build credibility with your hiring managers and the teams. So you can provide all that data to them, so they're confident that your approach is, it's the most logical and it's going to give you the most likelihood of filling this position quickly.
Yeah, I agree that getting your hiring managers involved in this research and discovery phase is really important. It gives them a window into the behind the scenes of recruiting. Recruiting isn't just putting CVs in their inbox. Actually, a lot of effort, research, data informs how we operate. So something I found really valuable in the discovery phase is what I call paired sourcing, or I know other people call jogging sessions with hiring managers. Damien, is this something that you've done in the past, and do you find it valuable?
Definitely, it's a really useful tool for firstly aligning with those hiring managers, so you're exactly on the right page of who you should be targeting. But you can also then take it a step further and start doing this with the rest of the team, utilizing their networks as a source of great talent. You can ask that team to reach out themselves or reach out as the recruiter and reference them. And what you'll find is you often get a much higher response rate from doing that. So definitely something I'd recommend, and something that's been done on previous projects like Beyond Trust. It was really successful. And working with Let's Do This here in San Francisco, it's something we did as well, and it was successful.
Cool. So now we're going to launch into our sourcing toolbox. This is by no means an exhaustive list. There's tons of different tools and add-ons that you can be using, but these are the ones that we enjoy using the most and we get the most value from. So I'm going to start with some more universal platforms and methods, ones that can be used by anyone or might be more useful for sort of larger businesses. And Damien's going to talk through some more niche creative sourcing methods and tools, maybe more pertinent to startups and scale-ups. So you'll likely recognize a few of these logos, and I'll start with the most familiar one on there, Google. So I'll talk through Google X-Ray. I won't go into detail about how to X-Ray, as there's plenty of guides online and it's pretty easy to do. But I'll talk about some of the great things about X-Ray. So as we know, not all candidates are on LinkedIn, and the candidates that aren't are probably not being spammed by recruiters every day. So you'll probably get props from finding and writing a compelling message to a candidate who's trying not to be found. X-raying brings up candidate profiles on a range of platforms like Stack Overflow or GitHub, Dribbble for design candidates, and even their personal websites or research pages, which will likely have personal emails as well. You can use tools like Social Talent, which is a Boolean builder, or Recruitem, which is recruit_EM, which X-ray searches for you on various different sites. And you can also bookmark your searches, your search results, so you can return to them at a later date. So I have a whole bookmark folder, which is lots of different X-rays. GitHub is another brilliant tool that can be used by recruiters. GitHub is, of course, not a sourcing tool. It's a community of developers. So just like LinkedIn is a recruiter tool, GitHub is a developer tool. So it's a great idea to access and engage candidates in the places that they hang out. Start by creating your GitHub account and profile, and don't be afraid to call yourself a tech recruiter on there. I have my profile, which has a digitized Frida Kahlo icon as my picture. The other information I have is the company I'm representing, location, and my LinkedIn profile. I haven't made any contributions yet on there, but maybe one day. And And in terms of actually sourcing using it, the easiest and most familiar way, or a good way to get started, is to use the advanced search. I mainly filter by language, location, number of followers, and number of repositories. And this is quite a good place to start out, but you'll get a very long list of candidates, so it might not be as focused. Another good approach is sourcing through trending. So there's a trending page on GitHub, and you can find it if you go on github.com/trending, which can be used to view the most popular repos of that week or moment in a particular area. You can then actually filter by technology and look up those who have starred or followed them to find relevant prospects. Imagine the difference in impact if you reached out to a candidate with, hey, I saw this repo, it's trending this week, that's really cool, as opposed to, I just wanted to touch base about this opportunity with my client. You know, it has a very different feeling to it. But yeah, have a play around with GitHub, because there's lots of ways you can use it, and it's a massive community of high quality talent.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. And once you've found a great candidate, you've got some unique content to then reach out to them and engage with them. How do you typically do that? Evie? Do you do that through GitHub, or do you then go to LinkedIn or email them?
Yeah, so there's actually a hack of finding a candidate's email through GitHub. It'll probably be too complex for me to talk through here, but you'll be able to find that online if you Google it, a guide to doing that. It makes you feel a bit like a developer as you're doing it. But yeah, if you can get their personal email, I'd always go for a personal email. You know, the intention of what we're going to be talking about in this webinar is how to cut through the noise, you know, how to be different and stand out to high quality, high tier candidates. And you know, if you did all this work finding a candidate on GitHub and, you know, finding their trending repo, and then just message them with a blanket template on LinkedIn, you'll lose the magic of what you've done there. So I would definitely opt to go through email and reference, you know, how you found them.
Yeah, great.
Oh, and our beloved search engines. So there's quite a few alternatives to LinkedIn on the market, and of course they do cost, but it's worth investing in more than one if you can. I'll start with Amazing Hiring, as it's what I'm using right now. It's a robust talent search engine. It brings up profiles aggregated from multiple sources, not just LinkedIn. It has an AI-powered algorithm which gives you more relevant search results, and you can actually contact candidates via the platform and integrate with Mixmax. One of my favorite features is the Chrome extension. So when you're sourcing on GitHub or LinkedIn, it pops up on a candidate's profile and gives you all of these social profiles they can find, plus their emails if it's public, which they often do. It actually has a really high return rate. Which really speeds up my process. And you know, following on from what Damien was talking about finding your tribe and looking at not just hard skills but soft skills for matching candidates for companies, you know, being able to study a candidate's social footprint will in turn create a better picture of who that candidate is and whether they could be a good culture add for the team that you're growing. And I know much of what Damien and I are going to be talking about is alternatives or plugins to LinkedIn, but I wanted to dwell briefly on LinkedIn and how you can get the most out of your LinkedIn Recruiter license. It is, of course, most recruiters' main channel. LinkedIn has over 575 million users with more than 260 million monthly active users. It's a huge but very saturated pool. LinkedIn has a few features that I think are sometimes forgotten, and there are features that I've forgotten myself. So an example of this is using saved searches, but strategically using saved searches. You can do this so that LinkedIn is essentially sourcing in the background and deposits candidate lists into your inbox as routinely as you request it. So I sometimes have for some searches once a week, or you can do it once every 2 weeks. Or checking out your notifications every day. So your notifications will say whether a candidate who's in one of your projects is open to opportunities. And if you do that, you know, every day, you know, you might be the first to message these candidates, which is a really great thing. A new sourcing feature that I like is custom filters. last week I did a webinar on finding diverse talent and went into quite a lot of detail around how to use LinkedIn's filters and Boolean searches to find candidates from underrepresented groups. And when I'm building out these long searches and investing a lot of time into them, I always save them as custom filters so that I don't have to re-enter my search parameters. And essentially, I'm speeding up my process. And it means I can do any generic search and then just apply this custom filter. So don't necessarily neglect LinkedIn. It is a great tool, but be smart about how you use it.
Yeah, going back briefly to Amazing Hiring and tools that give you plugins in general, I'm a big fan of as well. And we use Amazing Hiring a lot over in the UK, and we are using it a little bit here now in San Francisco. I'm not sure how popular it is here. Are there any other similar platforms that you think would be useful?
Yeah, so I was doing a bit of research into other kind of recruitment tech here, similar sort of search engines, and there's one that's quite popular called Entelo. It's very similar to Amazing Hiring. It does actually have some extra features. There's a feature I really like the look of, a whole diversity sourcing feature that looks great. But yeah, I think recruitment tech is a massive space in itself. And if we're kind of modern recruiters, we should have our finger on the pulse of new tools and products out there that can help us and our workflow. So something I try to do is research new things popping up, requesting demos. If it's a startup, you can get free trials often, and that's something great about Talentful as well. We are constantly investing in new recruitment tech and finding the best ones out there and trialing them.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, great. What I'll run through with you is a few more, I suppose, kind of sources which are more aligned to startups or just kind of a bit more alternative in general. So I'll start with Triplebyte. Some of you may have used Triplebyte before, but those who haven't, it's a paid platform. So there are pre-vetted candidates on there. So anyone who wants to join the platform, they go through a tech test, which I'm told is pretty difficult. And their aim is ultimately to have the top engineers on there. I think it's like the top 2%, which they use as their selling point, I suppose. But also having that reduced time spent for the organisation to be doing their own tech testing, which is useful. So there's both a sourcing functionality on there which you can use, but then there's also a candidate matching functionality, and that's based on the skills that you put in there. And it will send you matching candidates pretty much daily. I think you can edit that so they come in a bit less frequently. But what comes through is how the candidates have performed on those tests, and you can actually kind of measure that against people within your own team, which is pretty cool. And it also tells you a little bit about the candidate, so the size of the company they want to work for and the values that are important to them as well. So you can actually have a nice one-pager in front of you to give you a really good idea if the candidate's going to be a good match and if they're likely going to respond for you. For me, I'd say it's particularly useful for seed companies or for companies who don't have an in-house recruiter or don't have that much time to do their own tech testing. Beyond your initial hires, so I'd say maybe like Series A onwards, it would still be good. Some frustrations that I found with it was kind of the notion of going straight to an on-site without having your organisation do a tech test, for example. Your engineers might not be too keen on doing that. Plus, some candidates I spoke with had been told not to discuss salary, which kind of from a recruiter's point of view makes my life a little bit more difficult. All in all, a good tool, but kind of knowing when to use it, I think, is quite important.
And why would a candidate choose to be on the platform Triplebyte? If they've got to do a difficult test to get on there.
Yeah, I think kind of going back to the selling point that it removes that tech test from having to do that with multiple companies. Yeah. So they can do one and then be presented. Also, by giving kind of a lot of information up front, it avoids them being kind of contacted about companies that maybe aren't relevant for them. Because if you use the platform properly, you're going to contact the companies, you know, the candidates who fit your company the best, because they're the ones who are going to come back. So I think it's kind of it's more matched to what they're looking for. So that they, for me, without being a candidate myself, would be the main draws for that. Next, I'll talk about AngelList. Probably one of my favorite sources, both here in San Francisco, but in the UK as well. So it's a hiring platform for candidates specifically looking to work in startups. Although it's kind of grown a little bit bigger than that now. There are some post-IPO big companies on there, but it is great for startups. From a recruiter perspective, if you start with a business who hasn't got their own careers page set up yet, you can set up a profile on there and have it, you know, almost host a careers page for you, which is pretty useful in the beginning. So it offers free and paid for services. So the advertising functionality, that's free, but you can also pay to use their search feature. And they've got another feature called A-List, which is a pay per placement feature, which I actually found particularly useful. So ultimately it will source candidates for you based on the data that you input, and it will present candidates to you bi-weekly that you can then reach out to. It takes a little bit of collaboration, so like yes knowing on candidates who are right, who aren't quite right, and providing feedback in there. But once you've done that, it's actually very accurate. And I found the response rate was particularly good. You can send some really personalized messages through there based on their profiles. And I quite like the fact that when I was having conversations with candidates coming through AngelList, a lot of those conversations were about, you know, if they can see potential in your product, which I really like. So they're already getting bought into the mission at that first conversation, which is ultimately going to improve conversion rates further on down the line. So that's something I definitely recommend using and looking into. The next one on here is Y Combinator. A lot of you will know about Y Combinator already. It's a startup accelerator with events taking place twice a year, with talks, presentations, and then finishing up with a demo day, which is ultimately aimed for the organizations to raise their seed funding. So why is that a good place to source? If you have come through YC, you can advertise on their platform, which is great. It gives you more exposure as a company, which is really important for startups and having that brand presence out there. But candidates can also sign up to work in startups on there. So there is a search feature. It is limited to companies that have gone through YC. But if you haven't, you can still use it. But you can use it as a tool for identifying places to headhunt startup strategy from. They release lists and they release data on how previous batches are getting on, so you can see which companies are growing and have a great pool of talent you can start to look at. But you can also figure out which companies aren't doing so well, which might be a great place to source great engineers or product talent from too. Crunchbase is on here for a similar reason. It's a really powerful tool to use when putting together your sourcing strategy, which we'll move on to. And it's definitely something I'd recommend using to do your market map. Crunchbase and YC, neither of them are used, designed to be used as sourcing tools. But if you use them in the right way, they can be really beneficial in market mapping and building out those targeted lists. On that note, it's really important to shout out LinkedIn Talent Insights, which if you aren't using already, you should be. It's really user-friendly. You can pull great reports on there to give data and insights to your stakeholders. And definitely I'd say Crunchbase and YC shouldn't be used in place of insights. It should be used as well as to give you a really accurate pool of data when putting that together for you.
Yeah, I've used Crunchbase quite a lot recently, and I think it's a really great tool. And actually, you can kind of use it as a sourcing tool, because while you can filter via sort of funding rounds and companies, you can actually search for people, so like the senior management team within these startups. So do you think it's worth investing in the pro version of Crunchbase for your recruiting efforts, or do you think the free one will do?
That is a tough question. I think if you're going to be purely using it for recruitment, I'd say there are better tools to invest in. But if your business is already using it, I'd say jump on the back of it. I think if you've got the budget for tools, maybe don't focus on that, because it's ultimately not built for sourcing. There are better tools out there. For me, I'll probably go AngelList and pay for that. And get a few more kind of results that way. So what I wanted to do next is just give you, I suppose, a bit of a visual on why diversification of the sources that you're using is important. This chart just gives you an overview of candidates that we had at interview stage on a previous project here in San Francisco. Clearly, LinkedIn is the biggest source, and as Evie mentioned, don't neglect LinkedIn. It's great. It's a really great tool. But as you can see, we've got a strong pool of talent from AngelList and TripleByte, and also from referrals too. So LinkedIn is great, but it's not the only source. And I suppose for me, the key takeaway from this is just track your metrics and track the conversion rates for each source that you're using. Compare that with the amount of time you're spending on each source as well, so you can figure out which is bringing you most value and which you're kind of converting the most talents. And be strategic about your approach. If something isn't working, don't continue to use it.
I'm going to talk about talent pooling. A talent pool is a group of high quality qualified candidates who are interested in working for your company. So this isn't your active pipeline of candidates. It's candidates who you may have engaged with at some point and have potential for future roles. Talent pools allow you to organize and segment anyone who has ever engaged with your brand, so that instead of starting from scratch with each role you open, you can surface the best candidates for your job when you need to from your own database, in turn reducing time to hire and cost per hire. Talent pools are more than just a database of suitable candidate profiles. It's one of the most effective methods for proactive recruiting. Building a talent pool is a long-term strategy for filling positions that may not even exist at the moment, and it's a key element of modern recruiting. So how often do you have a candidate that come back to you on email and say, this sounds great, I'm interested in what you're doing, but I'm not looking right now? What do you often do then? Do you just send a LinkedIn invite, standard let's stay in touch response? And how often do you never hear from or reach out to that candidate again? This probably happens quite a lot, and it's certainly something that I've been guilty of in the past. So the ideal scenario is that you've got a mechanism for getting back in touch with this candidate, and you have this candidate join your talent pool or talent community. Most ATSs have talent pooling functions or an integrated CRM system to manage this. Alternatively, you can create a ghost job on your ATS and call it talent pool, or even a spreadsheet. So spreadsheets are flexible and a great way for when you're starting out, if you're a startup and wary of cost perhaps. But as soon as you start to deal with any kind of volume of candidates, they become quite manual and cumbersome. So it's worth looking into your ATS features or your CRM software.
Yeah, and in your experience, how does talent pooling change if you're working at a startup compared to a large business?
Yeah, so if you're a startup, your talent pool is likely to be smaller and more manageable, and it will probably start out with being mostly your founding team's network and referrals. So it's easier to sort of stay engaged and have a kind of cadence of contact with those candidates and keep them up to date with what you're doing. You know, you might not have to necessarily invest in any big sort of CRM system or software, but when it comes to being an enterprise where you could have thousands of applications and, you know, in your database thousands of rejected candidates, you really need a fully functioning sort of strategy with how you do that. It needs to be a well-oiled machine. So it's a project, you know, to build a talent pool when you're an enterprise business, but it can be incredibly valuable for recruitment teams and really help with reducing things like, say, you know, time to hire and cost per hire.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, so I'll talk a bit about the different talent pools, and I've listed them here, and you can see this on my diagram. So the most obvious one is former candidates. So these can be your quick wins. This is any candidate that you've spoken to who is strong but didn't get the job. They may include your silver medalist candidates who made it to final stages but didn't get offers, or candidates who are promising but maybe needed to develop a specific skill before being a good fit. The average corporate role receives 250 applications, leaving 249 unsuccessful candidates. You can expect that more than a few might be relevant for the future. And on the plus side, you know, these are already really engaged in your brand. Another pool is passive candidates from your sourcing efforts, people who you've reached out to and they've expressed interest, but timing wasn't right, or just unresponsive candidates. I tend to keep these candidates in a spreadsheet with conditional formatting, so I get a signal when it's been, say, 2 weeks or 1 month since I contacted them originally, and then I know to follow up again. Opportunistic, these are candidates with promising skills who've expressed some interest in your company, say at an event, over coffee, via a referrer, but there wasn't a fit for a particular role at that time. Alumni, of course, so this includes anyone who's ever worked for your company before, including interns, volunteers, freelancers, in addition to former full-time employees. Interns in particular is a really great talent pool, and it shouldn't be neglected, and there should be a process for re-engaging with them. And diversity initiatives. So lots of company investing very heavily in D&I with hopes of it impacting their pipelines, but they often lack a framework to manage new candidates that aren't ready to apply, say leads from events, making it really hard to maximize return on investment. Talent pooling can be hard to keep on top of, but it's an incredibly valuable asset for a recruitment team. In times like these, where you could be on a pause or a slowdown, this could be a really great place to invest your time.
Great. So we're almost there. So just to summarize, I suppose, some of our kind of key tips for competing and hiring high-tier tech talent. Firstly is investing time in the discovery phase of your sourcing strategy. This genuinely will help you improve conversion rates and avoid that post and pray approach that a lot of people take. Secondly, diversifying the tools that you use will give you access to more candidates and more information about those candidates as well. If you speak to somebody in your engineering team, which I've done at most businesses, they'll frustratingly tell you that they just don't check their emails. You know, so do diversify, and I think the key is just, as we said earlier, is just to track your success at each source and use that data to influence the tools that you do use. There are so many out there, you know, we've not given you an exhaustive list, so experiment with different things. And then finally, talent pooling. It's such a great way to achieve your long-term hiring strategy goals and lower your future time to hire. So if your team isn't doing this, you should definitely start doing that. And that's us. Let's have a look at a few of the questions that are coming through and get those answered. So what do you do if, when market mapping, your total addressable market is too small? I'll take that one, if that's okay, Evie.
Yeah, cool.
So for me, that's just about that's spending time with your hiring manager. presenting that data back to them and making suggestions based on the technical skills they're looking for. If they are being too restrictive, tell them, but also show how making small changes can widen that talent pool. Use your data, show them by kind of changing X or Y, they're going to have access to, an extra 1,000, 2,000 candidates. But it's just about iterating in that research and that research stage to make sure that kind of once you do then kind of go to market and find great candidates, you're in the best position to have a great pool of talent there.
And just to call out to anyone, if anyone has any questions, now's the time to put them through. So get some questions in there. So we've just seen another one come through. Is sourcing different in the UK versus the US? Damo, you've had more time sourcing in the US. I mean, in my opinion, I think good sourcing is universal, and a lot of these skills, go across countries. But I'll let you take that one in more detail.
Yeah, for sure. Great sourcing is universal. It's just about kind of using the data and adapting to your environment. And the tools ultimately that are available to you, and just experimenting. Your sourcing techniques won't change. It's more about the tools that you have to hand and understanding that market and the kind of what talent is in that market, where to find them, and how best to engage them. Have we got any more questions here?
Yeah, so how do you decide how much time you spend on each platform? Yeah, so I think when it comes to all of these different platforms, you almost don't want to get too bogged down by trying to switch between them. I think you want to experiment and devote some time to experimenting with different platforms and find what one works best for you. We're all different. It would feel a bit arbitrary for me to say an hour on Y Combinator and an hour on GitHub. But I think A/B test your platforms. Make sure you've got metrics like quality, quality of candidate, quality of hire. You want to have a correlation of how much time you're putting into the quality you're getting out. So long as you're tracking that and looking at your funnels, you should know like what one to spend. If you created a chart like Damien did with one of his previous clients, that almost in itself gives him, where his time should be spent. 30% on AngelList, 50% on LinkedIn. So collecting data and will really inform how you should split your time on these platforms. But the key, as Damien said, is diversifying, and your point of differentiation to a candidate could be what platform you reach out to them on.
Yeah, I agree. Another question that we've had: do you have any good Chrome add-on that you use? Yeah, let me have a look at my toolbar right now. So Amazing Hiring, I'd definitely recommend. It just pulls, once you're on a candidate profile, it just pulls all of their other social profiles into one place. So it makes it really easy to then find their GitHub profile and any contact details if they do have them, so you can reach out to email. I also have Rocket Reach in there at the moment. Again, a great tool for finding an email and choosing that route rather than a LinkedIn email. What about you, Evie? Have you got a couple that you like to use?
Yeah, so I like Octo HR. I don't know if you've used that, Damien, but it's another kind of pop-up on a candidate profile, say on LinkedIn or GitHub, and it gives you a summary of their skills. So some candidates will list every programming language under the sun on their LinkedIn, and it's not clear actually like what ones they're using most. Whereas Octo HR will pop out and say on their GitHub, 80% of what they're coding in is Python. So it's actually a really good indicator of understanding a candidate's skills a bit more. So I like that. And another one that isn't necessarily recruiting related, well, I guess it is kind of, is Grammarly. So I love Grammarly. It's kind of like an advanced spell check and grammar check. But when you're, and we're going to hopefully in other webinars talk about engaging candidates and the reach out, and we're going to really dive into that. But one of the biggest faux pas you can do is have bad grammar or bad spelling. So Grammarly, I really love for that.
Great. Another good question here: how much time per week do you dedicate to your technical sourcing, and what are your outreach goals? What does your typical week look like, Evie?
It depends, because sometimes I operate in a way where I'll have a week that is really heavy with technical sourcing, and then by proxy my next week is very heavy with screening. So sometimes I juggle it like that, or I'll try to kind of have an even balance. I think if you're forecasting quite well, and you're planning your time, you can really decide what time you're spending on technical sourcing. I also like to use response rate quite a lot. It's something that I track. I don't actually use LinkedIn. I use it in a spreadsheet. It's to track exactly what my response rate is, and that dictates how much technical sourcing, how many reach outs I'll need to do. If I've got 30% response rate and I reach out to 100 candidates, 30 of them might come back to me. Of that, 20 of them might want to talk. That's an ideal world. That would be great. But I'll then be really busy with reach out. So I kind of use that data to inform how much time I spent. And what is the best sourcing tactic on LinkedIn without a license? X-Ray. Using X-Ray, you can do that. I don't know if Damien, you've got any advice for that.
I haven't used LinkedIn without a license in about 3 years. So for me, get a plugin. Get something that you can land on a profile. So you can still do basic Boolean searches without a LinkedIn Recruiter license. You're just going to have to be a bit more creative with how you then reach them. So if you've got a plugin which can then kind of give you the email address, most candidates want to be contacted over email anyway, so you can do it that way. You can still do basic searches and then contact them directly. That would probably be my recommendation. If you don't have a LinkedIn license, I'll probably have that other conversation with the hiring team and see if you can start to use that. Luckily at Talentful we all have one, and we take that with us to all the companies that we work at. So another question: do you find that people's motivations to move jobs differs in different geographical locations? That's a tough question. For me, kind of let's talk kind of UK and San Francisco. I think when people are actively looking to move, it typically is because they're kind of not happy where they are, or they want to grow their skills. I think for me that's universal. I think the difference comes in is when you're headhunting people that aren't actively looking for a move. The motivations to speak to you might be different. What I've noticed, particularly looking at startups here in the Bay Area, is a lot of people they're more interested in the mission of the company. Are they solving a problem? And it's about understanding that, and you can use your kind of mission-driven business as a great way to engage with that candidate. Or there are people who simply will move because they're looking to kind of build their skill set and kind of build their experience. So it does differ slightly, but in general, I'd say there's not a huge difference in why people tend to look for something here. Would you agree, Evie?
Yeah, I think from experience, benefits packs here are a lot more like dynamic. So there's a big emphasis on free food in the office, and doing laundry for candidates, particularly in these big tech companies. And I haven't seen that in a lot of other places. So there is actually, if a candidate is moving from somewhere where they get all of their like dry cleaning done, they have free food, breakfast, lunch and dinner, all these additional perks to just their comp, that is actually a motivator, you know, to then move to a company where they don't get any of that. You know, they'll probably want to factor that into their comp. So that's something that I've noticed about here in the Bay Area is those benefits packs are really great sometimes. So you know, it's something you're competing with, for sure.
Yeah. Another question, typically what conversions are ideal through the funnel for you? That's a tough question. For me, I always try as much as I can in terms of reach outs and that conversion rate to be as close to kind of 40% as I can, which is not as easy as it sounds. And that's why strategic sourcing is so important, and doing that research initially, so that you can give yourself the best chance to hit that number. I think from kind of initial phone screen through to on-site, if you kind of source right and you've been very strategic, there's a good chance that the candidates you're speaking to are going to be a good fit anyway. And it's more about assessing some of those soft skills. So for me, really, like 50% through to on-site should be an absolute minimum after phone screen. But realistically, you should be aiming for higher than that. What would you say, Evie? Is that your experience too?
Yeah, it does depend. Like some of the companies I've been in the past, like DeepMind, had a very difficult technical step. So that the first technical stage screened out quite a lot of candidates, and it's really hard to assess that, you know, from a recruiter's perspective. Before then, it was just really high bar. So you know, you have to kind of lax your conversion rates a little bit then. And you know, some of the sourcing methods I would use is using GitHub to find that really great technical talent to try and boost those conversion rates a bit more. In terms of from like recruiter screen and me sending my shortlist to first stage, I aim for 100%. I kind of pride myself on finding, you know, really doing that research and discovery and understanding what my hiring manager wants. So I always like to get to a point where everyone I put forward is good enough to get an interview. So I look for 100%. You know, I'm quite visual and I love funnels. I love creating funnels and analyzing them. And you want your funnel to look like a trunk more than like a really skinny funnel. So you know, you want to make that look as you know, as wide as possible. But yeah, it does depend who, you know, what your interview process is and who you're working for. But you have control over the top of your funnel, and so you should really hold yourself accountable to those conversions.
Yeah. It looks like we've got one more question in the queue. This is great. Thanks, Evie and Damien. What is the best sourcing advice you would have given yourselves when you first began to source top tech talent?
Good question.
It is a good question. I would say kind of rewatch this webinar. I think would be a really useful place to start. But for me, it's all about investing that time in that kind of research phase. I think that's really key, and I think it's with the fast-paced nature of some companies. You know, particularly with Talentful, we're often joining companies because there's an urgent need there. I think, you know, an inexperienced recruiter could get caught up in that and kind of skip that step and just jump straight into sourcing. So my kind of top tip will be just to step back. Don't kind of skip that research phase, because it is really important, and it will save you a lot of time further on down the line, and reduce that time to hire. Because ultimately you're going to have a much more robust plan, a much more kind of you know, a much better starting point to start sourcing, and you will see results from that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I also would say track everything. So I now track all of my sourcing efforts, my conversion rates, my response rates, you know, comparing different platforms, response rate on this platform versus that one. And I really use spreadsheets to help me make informed decisions and use data. So it's not just, you know, finger in air. I think this. So that's been really powerful for me, and something that I'll do moving forward. Yeah, I think that's all for questions. So thank you everyone. That there were some really good questions there. And that concludes this webinar. I hope you were able to gain some value from it, and will be able to implement some of these strategies in yourselves, in your own sourcing strategies. And we'd love to have support to support you beyond today. So you can find out more about Talentful, our products and our services on talentful.com. You can also register for more webinars like this one. We'll be running them every few weeks. As a bit of a teaser, the next webinar we're looking at putting on, it will be on the next phase of the talent life cycle, so engaging talent and creative reach out methods, a really juicy topic. So watch this space. But you can also go back and look at some of our previous webinars on talentful.com/webinars, because they'll be on demand and they're recorded. And if you'd like to chat more about any of this, you can reach out to Damien or I on our emails or on LinkedIn, and the information's down there. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Damien.